No, no, no. I will not let you manage my money. I do not need you. I'm doing well without you. Goodbye. Now that's literally how the conversation between me and a potential investor went last week, as he was basically shoving my hand and pushing away my business card when I was trying to hand it to him. So this week's episode is about rejection, but it's really about normalizing rejection. So the event I just told you about happened last week when I went to a financial conference. And usually I go to these events to speak, but this time we were, a little bit late with the invitation. And so when we approached them and say, yes, we want to speak, but they said, guys, listen, it's too late, but we would love to have you as guests, so just come by. So I went there as a guest, and when one of the speakers finished talking, I thought, I'm going to approach him and talk to him and tell him a little bit about our hedge fund. And so as soon as I came up from the audience, he was like, did this whole spiel that I just told you about. And it got me thinking, a few things. First of all, what a classless douche, Then I thought, okay, sometimes rejection is not really about you, but it's a reflection of the person that's rejecting you. And then I thought that, damn, if I ever speak and somebody comes from the audience, mental note, don't, brush people off. You never know who you're offending and who these people are. And then I thought, and it makes you look like an asshole, basically. And then I thought, since most people do act like assholes, it's always better to be a speaker rather than be a member of the audience. But, we got sidetracked a bit. So going back to rejection, when he told me to basically, go away, he wouldn't even take my business card, I didn't take offense. I took it quite normally. And then I started thinking, why? Why such thing that should irritate a regular person doesn't irritate me? And it got me thinking all the way back. So I started dealing with rejection really, really early. It's a pretty personal story. I don't share it with most people, but I need to share it with you so you understand where I'm coming from. So I was 5 years old. I was living in Magnitogorsk, which is near the Ural Mountains in Russia. And the place is famous for two things. First of all, for, metal production. And second, for violating like every environmental law there is. So by the time I was 5 years old, I had completely dysfunctional lungs and I was in a hospital for a year. The doctors were trying to find out what's wrong with me. They sort of saw that I have problems with my lungs, but there's nothing that they could do. So a year in, they call my parents and say, listen, we kind of need the hospital bed for, people we can actually cure. We don't know what to do with your son. Take him home. Goodbye. And that was my first rejection. And I hope if you ever, get your first rejection, it's not going to be such a near-death experience as mine was. But my mother refused to believe that nothing could be done. So she went to speak to every doctor that there was, anybody that would even hear her out and, listen to her problems. And I think her and my dad went to at least 30, 40 people until one of the doctors said, you guys, you know what? There's no guarantees, but I know somebody that has this experimental treatment that may help your son. So a week later, we got on a flight. The doctor took me in. He said, listen, I need to work with your son for a month without the parents. I'll see what I can do. And ended up basically saving my life. So, from that moment on, for me, rejection, failure, it was something that was absolutely unacceptable. It was something that was sort of hardwired into me that you cannot accept rejection. First of all, rejection is normal. It's not something you go crazy about. You can't accept it. And second of all, failure too. Failure is necessary for you to move on. And so from a young age, it was sort of drilled into me that, failure is normal. And so I came up with a concept. For me, that concept was called normalizing rejection, which to me simply meant that every time you get rejected, don't worry about it. There's a lesson in there. And literally, to me, every single thing that I'm proud of, every good thing that happened to me was a direct outcome of a rejection or a failure. And the bridge from the rejection to success was patience. So let me be a little bit more specific. For example, I'm about to get married for a second time very soon, happily, which was a result of, of a painful divorce. I'm working in an amazing hedge fund, new industry, financial industry, which was a result of, an abrupt end of my career in another industry. And I'm running an amazing business with my partner, which was the result of me simply being a pretty shitty employee and not being able to work for anybody. So all those rejections and failures led to something that is way, way better. And in all of this, I got a few lessons. So first of all, rejection is not the end of the world. It's a beginning of a new one. And it's a mentality shift that you need to get. If something ends, it's not an end, it's a beginning of something new. So, avoiding rejection, avoiding failure is sort of like avoiding progress. And I remember my dad had this amazing saying that, alcohol-free beer was the first step to a rubber doll. And it kind of reminded me that do not fear rejection, embrace it. Number two, rejection isn't always a reflection on you. It doesn't mean that you need to readjust or change something. A lot of the times when I got rejected, it wasn't because my idea was bad or I was delivering it badly, but it was because the person I was speaking to, he had a lot of problems, and he was sort of putting his problems onto my idea and looking at my idea with the prism of his own problems. Or he just didn't have time to even listen to me because he was constantly in his own problems. So a lot of the time, rejection is a reflection of the person you're talking to, and there's nothing that you need to change about yourself. It's they who have the problem. The third thing, on the contrary, sometimes, when the market tells you that an idea isn't good, or you're trying to raise money, you knock on doors and people are not giving you money for the idea, maybe the market really is telling you that this idea isn't the best. There's something that you're not seeing, because when most people try to run a business, come up with an idea, they're quite biased. They don't see all the negative aspects of their idea. So when the market tells you no, take it as a sign that maybe it isn't the best idea, and it's saving you a lot of time and money now rather than you finding out the hard way later. The next thing I learned is rejection can free up a lot of your time, and a lot of the time, and that's my personal experience, you work in an industry, you work in a job, and you're not very happy. You wish you could change a job, you wish you could change an industry, but you never get to it. There's always, you're like, I'm not happy, but I'm gonna work here a little bit longer, maybe things will change. And sometimes when things come to an abrupt end, it's that kick in the butt that you needed for you to make that change, because it's a change that you wouldn't make by yourself. So once again, rejection, failure may lead to you finally getting that dream job, for you changing that industry, for you starting something new that you didn't dare to do before. Next thing I learned is that rejection rejection and failure both lead to you being very, very creative. I always love to use the example where the rental company Avis in 1963 came up with an amazing ad saying that, listen, we're second, we're cool with it. We know we're not first, we're second, but because we're second, we try harder. And then they listed this whole things that they do and how they try harder. They clean the ashtrays, they make sure that the car smells good, and they're doing all of it because they can't afford to lose you as a customer, because they're number two. And so I love that example, and it always gets me to think that when you are not yet number one, you're succeeding, but you're not the top, you're always trying harder. The sixth thing I learned was that, and there's a really good saying about this. First of all, failure and rejection often provide you with the best lessons in life. And there's a Jewish saying that says, God, thank you for only taking currency. And what that means really is that some of the mistakes and the rejections will cost you money, but it's only money. That's the only thing you're losing. And as you grow, as you succeed more in life, you begin to understand that money is really just a tool. It's not, the end of all means, and it's just a tool that you use to get somewhere. And there's a lot more important things in life. So your rejections and failures will often provide you with the cheapest education you can find. The cheapest education in the sense that it might only cost you some dollars, but it will give you a lesson for the rest of your life. So make sure you find those lessons in those rejections and failures. And the last thing, a lot of the people say that back then I used to get rejections. Back then, people used to say no. Back then, I used to fail. Let me tell you one thing. No matter how successful you are, and this happens to me today, I feel like I've done pretty well and have businesses and all these things going on. I still get rejected today. The story I told you in the beginning happened last week. I still get rejected every week. When my company sends proposals, we hear way more no than we hear yes. But when we hear the yes, it's worth it so much more, you appreciate it so much more. So don't think that rejection is just a sort of phase in your life. You will always continue to get rejected as you succeed. Sometimes those rejections are going to hurt even more. They're going to be even bigger for bigger sums, and you might feel even worse about them. So it's not something that happens only to successful or unsuccessful people. It's something that happens to everybody. So my point is this: rejection is normal. Rejection is progress. It's something that you need to learn to use, to get the lesson out of it, and to keep going. It's definitely not something to cry about, not something to worry about. Just make sure that whenever there's a rejection or some sort of failure in your life, make sure that you have that one element, that glue that will connect you from rejection to success, and that's patience. Patience, 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 and hard work. I hope that you can relate to what I was saying today. If you have another experience, or if you have a similar experience, put it in the comments. We would love to hear from you. Hit the bell, subscribe, and see you next week.